to, which translates to, you don't use your logical side of your mind. Okay? Which means that you go reactive rather than thought-provoking. Okay? So it's kind of interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but competency versus inferiority from 6 to 12. Now, adolescent teens to 20s. Okay? So 13 into the 20s, it's identity versus role confusion. Who am I and what do I stand for and who do I want to be and what kind of friends do I want? It's a tough one. It's a tough one. You know, you see people walking around with big old mohawks and purple hair and pink hair, and if that's you, so be it. But what are people trying to do? They're trying to stand out. They want to be themselves, but yet they want to fit in. So they're trying to say to themselves, who am I? You know, so once again, teens to 20, identity versus role confusion. What is the result of role confusion? Role confusion is where you don't fit anybody. You don't fit anybody. You try to be everything to everybody. You try to be a chameleon. You don't know who you are. What you are is not good enough for you. You've got to be what everybody else is. Or even worse, what everybody else thinks you ought to be. Now, we all do that a little bit, okay? But one of the things that we do, we have to have identity. We have to say, I stand for something. So sometimes, though, that's bad. So sometimes it's, I'm going to pick the worst people to hang around with because that's what I stand for. Okay? So we see people go extremes, but it's identity versus role confusion, teens to 20s, big area. Then we go early adulthoods, okay, 20 to 40s. Now this is kind of interesting because this is intimacy versus isolation. Now that doesn't mean a husband or a wife or even a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That means that you have some close friends. Now, you may be in that age group now, or you may be head of that age group, but at whatever age group you're in, you'll see how these are really critical. Like if you're 19 or 20 years old, or 21 or 24, and I'm talking about identity versus role confusion, you're kind of like, you know, I am kind of trying to figure out who I am. Because I don't want to be just everything to everybody. And it kind of bugs you because that's in the stage you're at. Well, here, intimacy versus isolation. Do I have some good friends? Do I relate to other people? The human body, I mean, whether you know, this is psychologically proven. We'll actually study this later. We have a need for fellowship with other human beings. People that are extremely isolated have cognitive and social abnormalities. They have tough times. They have difficult times. This isolation is something we don't want. Now, intimacy versus isolation, 20s to 40s. Now, middle adulthood, 40s to 60s, generativity versus stagnation. Now, I'm like 50-something, okay? Now, you'll learn that when you get to be 40s, you're just 40-something for 10 years. And then when you're in the 50s, you're 50-something for 10 years. You don't even remember how old you are. Then when you're 60s, you're 60-something, 70, 80. So whenever you turn that decade, you're good for 10 years. So I'm in that 50 deal, okay? All right, so I said to myself, okay, well, generativity means you feel productive, that you're doing something versus stagnation. This is where a lot of people go through, sometimes even say a midlife crisis. People are like, oh my gosh, I feel stagnant. I feel like I'm not getting anything done, okay? Well, that's like me. I love to teach, okay? I love to teach. So for me, generativity means getting up and teaching and sharing with others, and that's when I feel productive. So when do you feel productive versus when you feel stagnant, and when you feel that you're not only not gaining anything, but you're not growing. And you actually, of course, you know what stagnant means. Stagnant comes from a Latin word meaning stagnation, which means a pool of water that doesn't move. And that pool of water that doesn't move, that doesn't have any new water in it, doesn't get oxygen. So stagnation actually means a water that has become polluted, that becomes smelly and stinky and full of bacteria. So our word stagnation means it's kind of like that water. Instead of something moving in our life, we become stagnant and we begin to deteriorate. Okay, so that's a big thing, 40 to 60s. And then late adulthood, the last one, 60s and up, integrity versus despair. So integrity means, do I have some worth? Am I worth something to somebody, or am I just a bump on a pickle, or am I just taking up space, or what's going on? So what is that? That's despair. What is despair? Despair is, I'm worth nothing. I have nothing to add to anybody. You know, so if you have grandparents, or you have somebody that's over 60 that you want to encourage, ask them, tell me Tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was it like back in those years? Because a lot of integrity, a lot of what late adults have to offer is the history that we missed out on, the things they need to know to pass on to the next generation. What else do they need to know? They need to know they're going to try to encourage you. They're going to try to tell you a good job, but most of all, they're going to try to pass on something that will live on after they die. So it's interesting. So integrity versus despair. Later on, one of your assignments is going to be to go to a nursing home. And I want you to remember this because we're going to look for how people have integrity. I hope I don't outlive my integrity. I hope I'm able to think and talk and discuss and react, and I hope I'm never not that person that's sitting there in a wheelchair with total despair. When you see despair, of course, you know we have a lot of Alzheimer's diseases and a lot of different things that cause the brain to not be able to function. But despair turns into, I feel sorry for myself, things are going bad, I feel really bad, and then it goes into the next stage of isolation from other people. And when you go to the nursing home, we're going to have you watch for how do people have integrity, how do people have despair. I know an older gentleman, he's a dad of a guy I used to work with, and he's in a nursing home, and he is probably, well actually I guess I do know, he would probably be 92 years old. And his job every morning when he gets up is to say hi to 5 people. Now, he's 90 years old, and he's older, but he goes up and he says, hey, how are you doing? Now, I don't mean people just in the nursing, he's in a nursing home. He means people that walk in the front door. So he finds 5 people every day, and if he does, it's a good day. If he doesn't, it's a bad day. And so that's his goal. So that's his integrity. And he's just as happy as he can be. So that's Ericksons, kind of in a nutshell. We're going to have another assignment on this a little bit later, and I'll have you look at yourself in those stages and other people. So that's Ericksons. Now, I want to come over and talk about the very last thing that's on your next test. And this is research by a gentleman named Konrad Lorenz. Konrad Lorenz developed something that we call imprinting. All right? Now, Konrad Lorenz started out with these geese. Now, geese are fascinating because what happened with Konrad Lorenz, and you're going to be like, wow, I think I saw a movie called Fly Away Home, and it's just like that, okay? But Konrad Lorenz found these goose eggs. And all the mother geese got killed. In Fly Away Home, it was a forest fire that went through and killed them, a brush fire. So here's all these eggs. Well, it's really cool because whenever a little goose called a gackling, okay, when the little baby gacklings hatch, the first thing they do is find what's around them, and that's their mother. Oh, well, that's fascinating because then they do something called imprinting. They do whatever the mother does. And the mother goes through 1 year. And for 1 year, their brain is kind of programmed. So the mother right away shows the geese how to go get food, shows them how to wash their feathers, how to move around. And then all of a sudden, when it comes time to migrate during that year, they take that and they show them how to fly. And then they show them where to go for that year. They show them where to stop for water. And it's incredible because then when they get to their final destination and they breed, then the mother is done with the little baby goose, the little gackling, okay? And then that gackling has that memory for the rest of their life. And they replay that. So then they breed, and they have little baby geese of their own, and they teach them exactly what their mother taught. Well, that's called imprinting. So the question is, how much imprinting do we do? How much of what we've got is by seeing what other people do or seeing what people around us do? You know, imprinting's a big thing. Do babies imprint? Oh, yeah. We're like, say mama, okay, all right, or dada, or science, or psychology, okay. So imprinting is trying to mimic or imitate the person around you. So that's pretty big. Now what Konrad Lorenz did is whenever these little geese hatch, they found him and go, Mom! And so whatever he did, they did. So Konrad Lorenz walked like this, and guess what? The geese followed him, just like the mother would. Well, then it came time to fly, and he's trying to figure out how to get him to fly. And he couldn't get him to fly. And so it was a sad situation because those geese then, they had to clip their wings and make sure they didn't fly. Because if those geese were to have babies, then they would teach the next generation the same thing, and they would die because they didn't know how to fly. Well, in the movie Fly Away Home, it's a true story. This little girl finds them, and she does the same thing, and she raises them. But when it gets time to go, the biologist, the game board comes out and says, we've got to clip their wings, they can't go. And she goes, oh no, that's cruel, I want them to be able to live and go and do all these things. And so she broke them out of this, you put them in cages. You need to go, if you haven't seen this movie, it's a great one, it's available, Fly Away Home. I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but I need to teach a class, so you're like, no. Okay, so she gets these geese, and when it comes time to fly, they get these little glider planes, and they actually teach them how to fly. And they show them where the water is. And they fly them all the way to the breeding grounds, to where they breed, and then they survive. And then they watch them. Then the next year it's kind of cool because the same geese are flying south again for the winter. So imprinting, teaching and learning. Well, that wraps us up for another test. A lot of stuff. Be sure you study everything. And on Piaget and Ericksons, I'll ask you to list me all of the stages and steps. So good luck studying. I look forward to seeing your test after you get them submitted. See you next video.